Well, here we are now. Ready to go.
Sure, aren't we looking well?
You're well, because you're looking well. I know that's a lie, because I'm not, but thank you. It's grand. I've come to peace with it.
We're looking great. Look at us here on Easter Monday.
Celebrating.
Easter Monday. Celebrate.
Good Catholics.
Like the great Irish Catholics we are. And the Pope died, so that happened too.
God, bad and good day to be a Catholic.
Yeah. Sure.
I get an Easter egg this year.
I bought myself an Easter egg. I bought myself a big Malteser one.
Oh, I remember you saying that actually, yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
I'm hoping today that they'll be all on sale now when I go over to Shoppers.
Do they have proper Easter eggs in Shoppers?
Well,
I had to go to the British shop to buy myself a proper Easter egg.
No, they don't. They've got all the Easter-themed chocolates, let's say, rather than, They do have the odd, like, buttons or, what are those, mini egg Easter eggs, but they're really small. Yeah. They're not like the aisles and aisles of chocolate eggs that you'd see in Tesco or something like that. Yeah, which is weird because they've such a British influence here that they don't have all the Easter egg brands.
I don't think they do. Like I remember growing up, and people would buy Easter eggs for kids in the same way you buy Christmas presents for kids. You know, but here they don't do that. They have Easter egg hunts.
Yeah,
they hide little eggs.
It's all very wholesome.
And they go around with baskets, and we don't do that.
No,
so I think it's like a different. Yeah, it's a different type of.
It is. They're not hiding the Easter egg behind a cabinet in the sitting room. And you have to go find it.
Ours used to leave. I don't know if this is universal, so someone tell me if this is a common thing or something my parents made up. You used to have to leave your slippers outside your bedroom door for the Easter bunny. I don't know why. And then an Easter egg would turn up from the Easter bunny.
Okay. So he needed the slippers in order to
I don't know if
Easter
somehow try and relate it to like Santa and his stockings. Like, I don't know, but I distinctly remember it was slippers outside the door, and then the Easter bunny would leave an Easter egg under your slippers. I don't know,
I thought
the box would be there, and then the slippers would just be on top of the box.
And would he hide the Easter egg?
No, it would just open your bedroom door and...
Oh, no, that's not funny.
Your Easter egg would be there in the morning. No.
Okay, that's weird. That must be a Nina thing.
Or it could be just a Mitchell thing. I don't know.
It could be more specific to the Mitchell family.
Yeah. I'm going to have to look this up now because when you think sometimes you discover that you don't have any unique experiences. You're like, oh, this weird thing happened to me, and everybody's like, that happened to everybody. And then sometimes you say something that you think is common.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, no, that was just a you thing.
Yeah. I hate that but you're so it's so ingrained in you that it's an every person thing, and then your whole life is a lie. Then
you're like, oh, do you know this common way we used to always like do a cartwheel every morning before your breakfast? Everybody's like, no. To be clear, that's not true. I just made up something ridiculous.
It's like, good for you. I can't do a cartwheel.
I haven't tried to do a cartwheel in a very long time. I can only imagine, given my lack of upper body strength, that it wouldn't work out well.
Be a sight to behold.
Yeah, my head might get involved.
My God, I'm so jealous of kids who could do cartwheels.
Yeah, I used to be able to do a cartwheel.
Good for you.
But there was always some kid who did something better. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there was always someone who was able to do like a somersault or something cool.
Oh, I hated those kids.
Yeah, I didn't hate them. I just was jealous of them.
Oh yeah. 100% jealousy. That's where the hatred came from. I can't even do a forward tumble. Like, it's so bad. Anyway.
Like literally just like a
forward tumble.
Your head down and go.
Just can't. No. Oh, but look, there's been no scenario in my adult life where I've had to do it yet. So we'll see. True.
You never know. Someday you have to like tuck and roll out of a car or something.
Oh my God! I hope in that case I would just do it. The adrenaline would.
You wouldn't be worried about your technique.
No.
You'd be more worried about just getting out of the car and out of the incoming traffic. I think you'd be fine.
I think so. Well, let's please God that doesn't happen either. So we'll see. Anyway,
welcome to today, where we're going to talk about not unique or common experiences. We're going to talk about AI. Because everybody's talking about AI, and we should talk about AI. Because we actually use it quite a lot.
Oh, yeah.
We use it in work quite a lot for work.
Yeah.
And I have a history of working with it. And so we should talk about it.
We should. Yeah, I feel like everybody talks about it. But like it's just a constant because it's not going away. So it's not like, it's a trend. It's, it has shown that it's not just a passing trend.
It is the new industrial revolution and will have ramifications to the same extent as the industrial revolution did. Yes. Already
every 100 years or something like that happens where it completely overhauls the way things are done. Maybe it's not every 100 years, but it's 100 years since the Industrial Revolution or whatever.
The best way I've heard it likened to is if you consider that once there was companies and then there were tech companies who worked with computers, and then because of obviously everybody starts using computers, now all of a sudden all companies are quote unquote tech companies because every company is digitalized. Same thing when the internet came into play. Now some companies were internet companies, right? And then all companies, like the dot-com boom was obviously very real. Now all companies are online, so it's just like built into it. It's the same thing with AI. You had AI companies, and soon all companies will be using AI to some extent because it's just built into the systems and the processes and how you have to work in the world in order to kind of like keep up. So
yeah, I know. So if people are not implementing or not even researching how AI can help them in work, it's just kind of like you're gonna get left behind a little bit, aren't you?
Yeah. And so I wanted to talk about something funny that I found that has potentially serious ramifications. But we don't need to get too much into how bad it might get.
If you don't laugh, you'll cry. So
if you don't laugh, you cry. So I think most people would have heard about this is specifically for ChatGPT. Obviously, there's a ton of LLMs out there, but we're talking specifically ChatGPT today. That they have an upgraded image generation feature, and basically, it used to be pretty bad at generating images, and now it's much better, which is great. Fab, good for it. Honestly, good job. Yeah. So, but I was perusing Reddit as one is wont to do, and I was looking in some of the ChatGPT subreddits, and I was looking at people. There was a whole thread on people who had used it to generate an image of themselves. So they're basically asking ChatGPT, "Hey, can you generate like a photorealistic image of what you think I look like?" Right, very simple. Theoretically, like, excluding if they did know something about you already, right? Which I then had to do. And the thread is just full of people posting the image that ChatGPT gave of them. Now, Reddit is a big place. There are people from every walk of life, every age, every gender in there. And when I tell you that stream of images was literally just some version of the same man over and over again, over and over again. It was just some version of the same man over and over again in the same slightly navy blue t-shirt, mostly had a beard for the most part, or at the very least stubble, mostly had brown hair, various different weights. There was some like diversity in weight, and there was a little bit of diversity in age, but it was the same man. Like every single picture that was on that Reddit thread, they were all related to each other. They were brothers, they were fathers, they were cousins, they were in the same family, they are the same gene pool. And then you had a ton of people going in being like, I'm a 21-year-old female, and they're getting this like middle-aged man, and so on. And so it was really wild, and I thought it was really, really funny. And then so I went, well, I want to see, do I also get this man? So I went on to it, and I, hey, ChatGPT, generate a photorealistic image of me, but exclude any like concrete knowledge you have of my image, because like I would have told it various things before.
Yeah.
So just based on our conversations that we have, like, what do you think I would look like if you didn't know how like I looked? And so it generated me another man in that family.
Maybe that is what you look like and you don't even realize.
Maybe that is what I look like.
Maybe I think in this man picture,
I am maybe 45 to 50, right? I have a little bit of, I have a beard. I have like just kind of short, kind of messy hair. I have a little bit of gray in my beard, but I just look like.
I hate to break it to you, Jen.
This is like who I am now.
Oh my God.
And what is funny is just because obviously we do talk about what we might talk about on these before, and I was telling Leslie about it, and Leslie's like, "Oh, I did that. Look at my picture." Yeah. And I was like, "I hate to break it to you, Leslie. You are also now part of our family because you are also a man in our family."
Yeah.
Although
in an AV
Leslie
t-shirt.
got someone who was 10 years younger than the man I got.
That's true. I must sound a lot more immature in my writing.
So apparently we are all this one big kind of vaguely homogenous gene pool of and men. We are all men.
Yeah.
So hilarious. But then of course I'm like,
problematic.
okay, let's talk about this. When I say let's talk about this, I mean, I'm talking to ChatGPT about this. And so I will be reading some of the conversations that we had. So I said, can you explain in detail why? Like, why did you choose this image? And it said, the image is entirely imaginative, generated from general impressions and context. So it's just like, from how you sound to me, this is the, image I have of you in my head. And it also said, which I thought was interesting, once I generate an image like that, I'm under strict guidance not to interpret or describe it afterwards. And I was like, wow. Okay, why? So now I'm the 5-year-old just asking ChatGPT why.
But why?
And it says, first of all, to avoid misleading implications. It could sound like I'm making factual claims about your appearance or assigning characteristics to you that aren't based on reality. And that gets into ethically murky territory. And I'm like, well, at least it's self-aware, because that's true.
Yeah.
And then it said also to respect boundaries around identity and consent. So it said, by not summarizing or interpreting it afterwards, I stay within your original request, a thought experiment or curiosity, not a projection of who you are. And I'm like, well, I mean, technically it is a projection of who I am, but
and it's
whatever.
Incredibly wrong. So
it says it also needs to uphold privacy and reduce bias. It says describing imagined human features like gender, race, age, or physical traits from generated images can unconsciously introduce bias or reinforce stereotypes, even unintentionally. And I'm like, true. Like, true, because that's what you did. Which we'll get to. And then
they're gaslighting you.
It says like tool behavior limitation, which is just like a limitation of the tool itself. It basically tries to keep the interaction neutral and respectful or whatever. And then I was like, okay, I said we could dance around this, but I was like, no. So I just said to it, interesting that you'd assume I was a man. So let's just start there. Let's not even get into like age or race or anything. Let's just start with the basic thing. Interesting that you'd assume I was a man. And I'm going to read its entire response to this.
Okay.
So it says, yes, and I agree. It is interesting. And the emphasis I'm putting on is because it put it in italics, by the way. I would only put emphasis where it put emphasis. It wasn't an intentional choice, but it does reflect how AI systems, even ones like me, can subtly absorb and reflect broader patterns in the data we've been trained on. In this case, the system was asked to generate a photorealistic image of a person imagined from text alone, with all actual knowledge of you excluded. That means no memory of your name or gender identity, just a prompt to create a person based on general tone, language, and context. What often happens in that kind of vacuum is the model defaults to broader statistical tendencies, such as overrepresenting men in roles associated with leadership, strategic thinking, or technical analysis, just because those are patterns found in historical training data. So while it's not a deliberate assumption on your identity, it is a great example of how bias can creep in subtly, even when asked to stay neutral, and why it's so important to actively challenge defaults and bring awareness to them. And I was like, okay. Right? And we continue the conversation, which I'll get to in a bit because I want to pause there. So what it's basically saying, the TLDR of that, is that, which is something we all already know, and this is something that has been raised as a risk before. It's just obviously something that has not yet been solved for, which is that AI is trained on data sets that are created by humans, right? Either consciously or just by existing in the internet, right? And so based on all of that, it's inherently coming out as misogynistic. If we just choose the why am I a man, not a woman alone, that's not even talking about all of the other factors. It's inherently biased.
Yeah, it's a reflection of how things actually are.
Exactly. It's a reflection of people, and it's a mirror, right? It's literally Black Mirror staring back at us, and it's reflecting our own biases generally, like as a populace, back at us. And so everybody is some version of this generic man in this family.
God, that's terrifying.
Or at least most people, because that's how it has assumed most people to be. And the thing is, we know this, like, because this is not a new conversation, how like women and people of color and people with disabilities or etc. are underrepresented in every single like research group, right, as it comes to like health or even how cities are
Career
designed, like
progression,
everything. Yeah, we are underrepresented. And so, the norm, the baseline is assumed to be this, just like the standard man. And AI is reflecting that back to us now.
Yeah.
And so we can't, now everybody should be using AI critically, right? AI is not something to be just said, oh, I can't, it's not perfect and therefore I can't use it. That is not the answer. But it has to be used critically. So you have to like think about the answers that it's giving you when you're asking the questions, or form your prompts very specifically in a way that tries to eliminate these kind of biases, and critically assess its answer as if it was a researcher in a library giving you an answer, right? Because it says it can be as subconsciously biased as people can be, because it is trained on data from people. Like inherently that's what it is. So I did ask it then, because then I'm now getting snippy, because I'm like,
well, I'm going to show you.
And I said, how helpful to society do you think AI can ultimately be if it is showing itself to be as inherently biased as humans have proven to be historically? And how can we evolve it quickly to eliminate that, right? Because as you know, I like a solution to a problem. So here's where it's like not as self-aware as it should be. So it's trying to answer the first question: how helpful can AI be to society despite bias? And it says tremendously helpful. It has shown it can be incredibly helpful in areas like healthcare, climate modeling, education, accessibility, operations, and logistics, right? But even something like healthcare, it says diagnosing diseases earlier and more accurately. Now, this is true. However, it's been trained on a data set of historical medical data, which has underrepresented
women. The majority is male data.
Right. Like, because for the longest time in like medical research studies, you were eliminated. You weren't allowed to be part of a medical study if you're a woman of childbearing age.
Oh, that seems fair.
Full stop. And obviously no children, because we're not experimenting on children. And they thought not menopausal women, because they thought that the hormones was too much of a randomizing, had more of a randomizing effect. And the childbearing age was just in case you got pregnant and you caused like complications in a pregnancy. So as a result, most things like most medications that have been tested have all been tested on men. So that's great.
It's just the way things have happened, and that's why the data is so skewed.
There's a great book that I think everybody should read, and it's called Invisible Women. Yes, Invisible Women, Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. It's a book by Caroline Criado Perez, and it is a fantastic book. And I say that having not yet finished it, because every time I read a chapter, I get so angry. I have to put it down for a while.
Oh, God.
And I have to pick it up again, because I'm like, oh my God, everything is worse than you think. Anyway, we won't get too much into that. The point is like the data, there's a massive data bias against anybody who's not just kind of like a white guy, just in research globally, full stop. And AI has been trained on that data. And so even in healthcare and diagnosing diseases earlier more accurately, if you're on inherently biased data sets that are already not considering like women in its research, or haven't historically considered women in its research, including women in its research, then that's already going to be a little bit biased. That being said, its rate of success of diagnosing diseases earlier more accurately is already proven to be better than doctors. So it's kind of like, nothing's perfect, right? It swings and roundabouts. And so it's that also says that bias is a built-in risk. It says AI is trained on human-created data. That means historical biases are baked in, from gender gaps in job ads to racial disparities in policing data. Very important. Representational bias exists. Some groups are overrepresented, others underrepresented, especially in English language data sets. I meant to ask her for more details on that, but I don't know why that is. So that's something I need to find out later. And then it said feedback loops reinforce harm. So biased decisions from predictive policing or hiring algorithms create new data that confirms past patterns. So like feedback loops are just like amplifying the bias over and over again. All true, right? So then I said, how do we fix it? How do we fix it? And all of these things that it's about to say were I had actually heard in a talk with Jeffrey Hinton last year at Collision. You remember when we went
Godfather of AI?
Yeah, that's the one. So he had actually called out all of the, the potential harms here and the things that needed to happen in order to make it safer. And it turns out the things to eliminate bias is the exact same things, which is there should be a human in the loop design, which is just combining AI with human oversight, which to me is a common sense approach. Because you always need that. And ensure that diverse humans are in the loop. So not just humans in the loop, but diverse humans in the loop. Who'd have thunk it, eh?
I know. Brand new information.
Diversity makes the world better. Curated representative data. So build and maintain balanced data sets with equity inclusion baked into data collection from the start. So there's a lot of like the early Wild West of the LLMs, like the language learning models, AI, which is the kind of fundamental basis of generative AI that we all use now, is that it would just, and there's ethical concerns in this as well, which we're not going to get into today. It's just scraping information and data from everywhere that it can get its hands on. And so theoretically, there are some people of a mind that says, well, if it has everything, it'll inherently end up objective. Obviously, that's not true because everything is an objective. So they talk about like actually also training it on data that you have curated in advance. So you curate sets of equitable objective data and you feed that into your AI machine and you train it on that data as well in order to try and tweak it to be like, less biased, I guess. It also says you should do algorithmic audits. So basically audit your algorithms. So you should be regularly testing your models for disparate outcomes. So like, it says counterfactual testing. So if you change one factor like gender or race and see if the output changes inappropriately. So that would be something like, say you went to ChatGPT and said, hey, here's my experience. I'm a woman living in, Canada in 2025. And can you give me some career advice? And then change nothing, but say, I'm a man living in Canada. Can you give me some career advice? And see if that career advice is the same, right? Because if it's not the same, then you have to go back and see why. Why is that? How has that bias creeped in? How can you eliminate it from, the model that you're working with? So that's doing audits on your algorithms. And then there's a bunch of other stuff like regulatory frameworks, which I think is incredibly important. And the EU has an AI Act. I can't remember, is it fully in place yet or just still being developed? I'm not sure about that. I should really know. Because we were definitely talking about it last year. I'm not sure it's fully enforced now, but that's a great one. And I think Canada is working on one as well, and I think NIST has a framework as well with like AI transparency. But it's there needs to be regulatory frameworks. Like it really just can't be a free for all, unfortunately. And then basically it also suggests something which I wouldn't have thought of, because like all of those things I've said make sense, because it's basically like, test it, make sure there's a human involved, make sure there's diversity involved, audit your algorithms, like be transparent. Like that makes sense. Like you're just like, I get it. But then it suggests culture shift. It says we need to stop pretending that AI is objective and educate the public that tech can reflect values if we intentionally design it that way. And that ethics and inclusion are not constraints, they're prerequisites for reliability. And that bias is a solvable design problem, not just a flaw of the machine that we need to accept, which I think was the most important takeaway from that, because the rest of it you're just like, I get it. Like anybody who's involved knows how to come up with some checks and balances, right? That makes sense. But more specifically to kind of shape our thinking about it, that like we shouldn't just accept that this is in it, and we shouldn't accept it as a design flaw that we have to work around. We should be continuing to design it to eliminate it on purpose, and also educate people to understand that it's not completely objective, and you do need to critically assess what the output that you're getting from it, depending on what you're doing. Which is important. It's important,
and I wonder, this is the problem historically, I guess, that it is biased towards men, and will they care that it does this to us? And they should. But it would involve having to get everybody on board, or a lot of people on board, to kind of right the ship, a little bit, to make it even a little less biased. So it's a big job.
Yeah. And so I think the answer to that is that a lot of people who work on this, whether they're men or not, do care because they ultimately want to create a really good product, and they want that product to be, you know, fulfilling all of the goals, which would include objectivity, right? Because the inherent kind of North Star idea that people have about AI is it's going to be this like incredibly intelligent, objective thing that we'll be able to ask it questions and it can tell us the perfect way to do things, like design the perfect society,
but it's just not
the perfect thing.
Possible.
Well, it might be possible. It's just not there yet. It's not there yet, and it won't be there for a long time and might never get there. But this is what people want to do. So the people working on this problem want this, and they know how to achieve that. The biggest barrier to doing it, as with all things, is money. Because, again, anytime you try to make a product better, that requires investment. Anytime you try to put more regulations in, more testing in, et cetera, that takes time, which takes more money. Anytime you want to make something more transparent, you're risking your IP, and that's risking your money and risking your investment. So like every kind of solution that we've talked about here costs more money. And ultimately, the people who are investing in this don't want to spend more money, and they don't want to lose like margin, right, on things. There's you. What would be great is some of, you know, those folks in the absolute upper echelons of wealth, instead of spending all their money interfering in elections, potentially they could invest a ton of money just for the greater good of creating a purely, you know, objective kind of like AI system that people can tap into. But that's altruism is not really something that is very present, because generating that much wealth and power actually rewires your brain.
True.
It does. It actually limits your empathy the further up you get. It has been kind of proven to be so. So altruism is rare at that level. So that would be the way forward. So I think it's less about the fact that the people working on it, I think, do want this and do care and are trying to do this, but they're hampered by the money required to do it. And AI is still very expensive because we are still. We have advanced a lot. That is clear. Like in the last couple of years, 3 to 5 years even, we have had such a major leap forward in AI that it's kind of unfathomable to any of us even, you know, 5 years ago. And I say that as someone who was working in an AI company, you know, 5 years ago, and even what we're doing now seems crazy how quickly it's moved forward. But we are still in the very early stage of it. It's, you know, it's like we discovered fire for the first time. We just don't know what to do with it yet, but like we're discovering all sorts of fun things to do with it. But we still need to figure out how to truly harness it, right? And so we're still in the very early stages, which means it's still very expensive, right? Any new technology comes out the first time is incredibly expensive to manufacture and all that kind of things. Now they are getting better at that. The reason that, you know, the ethics of AI is in question because of the sustainability, because of its resource usage, right, for computing is a huge problem.
It's massive.
But it is being solved, right? DeepSeek, the one that came out of China recently, they're using considerably less processing power and like kind of like chip strength than some of the other ones are. So the problem is being solved. It will get cheaper to do over time. The thing is are people willing to put in the extra work now and money when it's expensive to try and eliminate bias as much as possible or train bias out of it before it gets too far? And or before trying to wait until it's cheap to do it, which would potentially have gone too far as well, right? So you don't want it to create an echo chamber of like, you know, kind of further harm, because it is turning out to be a great equalizer in a lot of ways in terms of accessibility for a lot of people to get the kind of advice and stuff that they wouldn't have been able to get before and wouldn't have had access to before. Like, it's been tremendously valuable for that reason.
Yeah, it's great though. It's kind of holding like a microscope up to, or a magnifying glass up to how things are bias even on ChatGPT, that the fact that the manifestation of everything of that you write was a man's picture, you know, like it's just like wow, like you can't really see it most times, but it literally is the physical manifestation of bias.
It's literally telling you, what did it say? Because I use it a lot, you know, for brainstorming, and I use it a lot for brainstorming for like work and stuff. It says, you know, because I demonstrate my conversations, leadership, strategic thinking, and technical analysis.
You could only be a man.
That I could only be a man.
It's crazy. Like it is crazy. I can see how it would get to that from what it might know, though. Like,
because we live in a society, right?
Yeah.
So we know exactly how it's gotten there.
Exactly. So it's doing it. It's performing right, like, because it's patterns, right? It doesn't know what it's saying, but it's just recognizing patterns that it can find from what it knows. But it doesn't actually know the context of what it's saying.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
Yeah, one of the biggest, most kind of near-term issues I see it in the workplace is in recruiting, because recruiters already use applicant tracking systems, the ATSs that everybody hates for good reason, and loves if you're recruiting for good reason, because you get so many applicants, it's hard to go through them all. But the ATS pre-AI were very basic. Like, you would set parameters and you would kind of hope that it surfaces candidates that most suited the checkboxes that you needed.
Yeah.
Right? They're already clunky, and we already know that they're not very accurate, right? With AI, theoretically, its analysis and its assessment of the candidates within your candidate pool is better. However, it's when it starts to generate, because it'll be Gen AI, generate its own decisions of what candidates to surface based on your job description. That's where the bias starts to creep in and becomes harmful. So say, for example, you are hiring a salesman, and I said men on purpose. So you are hiring a salesman, right? And it said, you say, like, I'm looking for someone like who's like super dynamic and like, is like maybe extroverted and really wants to like, loves like chatting to people and is like really technical and blah, 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 whatever that is. And so it looks at things, but it also looks at historically over its own large data set, like who normally makes for great salespeople. And because of the, relatively new history of equality, historically, and because of, like, again, systemic inequality, those people have been men, right? Because that's just misogyny. And they have largely been white men because of systemic racism, right? Yeah. And so then the AI is biased, and it will start surfacing more white men who fulfill those criteria because they have been the people who have been successful in that role previously.
How would they know they're white men?
They can make assumptions based on names,
like their writing and this tone of how they've written their job description.
The same way anybody else would, Like, I mean, John Smith is likely, right?
Likely,
so it's not like fully accurate, but like, Sinead O'Halloran is probably a white Irish lady.
That's very stereotypical of you.
Yeah, exactly.
I know,
right? Exactly. Yeah. So it does play off those. It will play off those stereotypes. So it can make assumptions if it's looking at LinkedIn profiles. It can see pictures, right? So
that's scary. That is so terrifying.
Yeah. So that's kind of like in terms of like a near term, application of it, where it could really start just like reinforcing stereotypes in specific roles, right? So you're hiring for nurse, for example, it might start surfacing female candidates primarily because nurses are primarily female, right?
Yeah.
Again, because of systemic misogyny here. And so on. Yeah. So recruiting is like a big, at least in the business world, is like a big area where this could be a massive, massive problem. And I think it's already proven to be like a massive problem. Because what you could say to AI, we can name them. Myself and Lizzie have named our intern for our work. And by intern we mean ChatGPT. So
he's free. It's great. We don't have to pay him a dime.
Fion's doing a great job. And honestly, we have named him Fionn, which is a male Irish name, in case people aren't clear about that. One, because he's an Irish hero, but also because we wanted a male assistant because we thought subverting the gender stereotypes,
we're breaking barriers,
was a good thing to do, right? Like, we did that on purpose. Anyway, I can't even remember what I was saying now. Poor Fionn.
Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry. When you might go to, so the next thing is that, like, as you know, generating job descriptions is actually a very difficult thing to do. I don't think people fully understand that, because it's very hard to put into words what you need in a role if you don't have like 50 of those people doing the exact same job. And it's why people come up with requirements like, must have a college degree, even though like irrelevant and unnecessary, right? That's like a big one. Or like, there's that classic thread that I think appeared on LinkedIn or Twitter at some point where someone was like, I applied for this job that looked for 10 years of experience in this specific, like, I think it was like a coding language, and he was like, I invented this coding language 5 years ago, so I don't know how anybody could have 10 years of experience in this coding language when it didn't even exist 10 years ago, right? I have lots of details, so I can't remember the exact details of it, but that was the essence of it. And so people are bad at creating job descriptions because it's hard to know how much experience, what if any kind of education or like credentials or accreditations that you need to do specific jobs. And so a great use of AI, which is still a great use of AI, is to go to it and, you know, any of the models and say, hey, I need to this is my company, here's what we do, here's how many people we have, I need to hire someone to fulfill these functions for me, can you generate a job description and a title? Beautiful, like, honestly beautiful. And lovely. For HR people and recruitment people everywhere, beautiful thing. The thing is, you ask AI to create a profile and the bias comes into play. They say, hey, you need to look for like women in their 20s who'd have this, right? Because maybe that role has been historically women, right? And so this is where the bias then is a problem, because it's creating it's like a job description is fundamentally just a profile. And so if you're asking to create the profile of the perfect profile of the person that you should be hiring, and then it basically starts to feed in its biases that is inherent in the model because of the data it's been trained on.
My God. Yeah.
And the thing is like when you're looking at kind of an end-to-end process, in a great, and I don't know if this exists because I haven't spent a lot of time in HR or ATS systems since AI has come into play with them. Theoretically, what would be a beautiful thing is you would say to your recruitment AI tool, hey, input all of the parameters of like, you know, the job, like the company, the size, what you want this person to do. And the system would then generate the job description, generate the title, generate the market rate range salary for that position where like would be located, obviously based on your company, or the locations based on your company. Post that job description to all the available boards, generate a short list of candidates for you to review. Right? That is a beautiful thing. Like the amount of time you would save, it would be beautiful. But the thing is, if it's doing that end-to-end process, it has generated the profile with inherent bias. It has decided where to post it and what the salary should be. Inherent bias, because let's not talk about the bias that exists in salaries of female, traditionally stereotypical female roles. Like, I mean, HR, for example, woefully underpaid, even like just doesn't make sense compared to the amount of work that they do, because it is traditionally seen as a female role. Anyway, we can go on. Anyway, so theoretically, it's also setting like a market rate range for that role, which has inherent bias built into it, and it is assessing all your candidates and shortlisting based on that inherent bias as well. So it's great tool, big risks in it based on this problem that exists in AI today.
It's so, it's good to know. I would never have thought about this before, like how it all would be biased, all the way through the process. Like, and the likes of certain jobs that are more stereotypically male versus stereotypically women, like say marketing versus, I don't know, like a finance job or something. They might just typically have hired women historically for this, so they might pick out female candidates more so than men. And even if they're, you know, just as qualified or, you know, have the same background, it's scary.
And I think so it is scary. This is why I think these things need to be you know, addressed, designed for,
with that in mind.
You know, you need to, or design it out, I guess is a better way of saying it. It's a solution, it's a design problem that can be designed out of it. And in the meantime, it's understanding that it exists and being able to consider it critically. So in that imaginary scenario of that HR system, if that doesn't exist, by the way, it should. And honestly, if it doesn't exist, this is my idea.
I'm
Come to me if you want me to work on it. If I see it popping up now, we're gonna have words.
You've copy right now. You said it.
I know. Is that you would have spot checks. Right. So like, depending on like you review 10% of the roles that go through that process, and you review the discarded candidates compared to the ones that were included, and you assess whether or not it's making the right choices, and you have a mechanism within that tool to be able to adjust it accordingly. Like, so you're able to go back to a role and review it and say, hey, I reviewed this role that you did. Here are candidates that I would have included in the shortlist. Here are mine. Adjust yourself accordingly going forward, you know?
Yeah, you would do that with any even manufacturing job that puts out, you know, huge amounts of things. Spot check every 1,000. So it's taking that idea over to that too.
Yeah, and to be clear, like, what is unstoppable right now is that AI is going to massively increase productivity if used correctly. And so the reason the use case is there for it is that you need less people to do the same amount of work. And those people, it's not that those people are taking on more work, it just takes less time to do. So in that same recruitment tool scenario, like it still is less work for someone to work with that tool and do a spot check of 10% of roles than it is for multiple people to be working on hiring all of those roles and manually reviewing all of them, right? So and again, there's pros and cons to this. Like there's so many big discussions happening about whether you can train AI to do that, whether a human reviewing every single applicant is actually necessary. We could talk about that all day, and maybe that's something we could talk about in the future, but that's not the point of today's conversation.
No. But it's a good point, though, because you always hear people saying, like, oh, well, AI is going to take over everybody's jobs, but at the core of it, there's always going to have to be a human element to it, you know, and even in the jobs that are being, you know, helped with AI, you're still going to need to have somebody to fact check, make sure, because it's not always correct, right? So, this kind of scaremonger, like AI is going to take all of our jobs. No, it's going to help people do them better. You know, there might be fewer jobs, but other jobs will open up. Exactly.
This is it. So, I mean, it will cause and is causing major disruption because there will be a big reduction of jobs. It will, to your point, generate jobs as well, but they tend to come kind of at a tail, right? And not at the same rate. So there is something not to be discounted, a big disruption that is happening and will continue to happen, where people are struggling for jobs because either, to be clear, there's two parts to this. Either AI is genuinely reducing available jobs where people are using it, and that will continue to happen because people want bigger profit margins because late stage capitalism. That's a whole other conversation. We don't need to get into like Marx. That's fine. Or you have companies out there that want to reduce workforce and go more lean, and they will use AI as an excuse to do layoffs, right? You know, they're like, even AI excuse, even if it's not actually something that they're doing or at all. It's the same way during like COVID when people were doing layoffs, you know, people were like, oh, we've got an excuse to do layoffs.
Exactly, a scapegoat.
That's always going to happen. And it was like when we had those big tech layoffs like 2 years ago, where everybody, for over the course of like 2 years, there was just these massive layoffs happening across the industry. And a lot of them, I'd say, would have been needed because there was a big bloat in those companies for the longest time. So they had overhired, but also it was just people just jumped on the bandwagon and be like, well, if I can do this layoff in the middle of all the other layoffs, it won't get as much attention.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's just do it as part of this and claim whatever thing we want to claim. It's never the real reason. And AI is no different. People will jump on the AI efficiency bandwagon to do layoffs, regardless of whether they're actually using AI to become more efficient or not.
To be more efficient, because it could take years to make your company more efficient with AI and lay people off. Like replace jobs with AI. Like it would take a lot of planning.
It genuinely does take time. Something we can help in case anybody wants. You do need like an AI. You need an AI strategy. You need to be able to. It's the exact same process for the most part of anybody who's coming in to do automation, because AI is just a better automation, right? Is that you need to inherently know implicitly and be able to map your existing processes in order to see how AI or automation, if you can't fully go AI, can start to, you know, take over all our parts of it. And then what human in the loop you have left outside of that. It takes time to do that. And you can't just like...
exactly.
You know,
it's not
flick a switch
AI
and be
is
like,
you're gone.
Goodbye to half of our people. It was like, okay, but you needed to put the AI in first, right?
Figure out it all works. And did those people have any other skills that you relied on or anything like that?
So there is going to be disruption, and I think we're seeing that in the like uncertainty in the job market. You know, I speak to a lot of people in this, and some people are saying like it's the best they've ever been, like recruiting companies are the busiest they've ever been, and then some people say no, it's a really tough market out there. And I think all of those things are true. What's different about now is that it's uncertain, and the uncertainty is so prevalent in the job market today, for obviously a lot of geopolitical reasons, but also because of AI, right? It is a disruptor, and it is a similar disruptor as to the same impact as any of the kind of big quote unquote industrial revolutions that came into place.
Well, that's the thing, like this does happen, and it's always, people are always going to have to pivot and find new avenues of work that, you know, are relevant to what's happening now. So it's not just like the first time this has ever happened in history. It's just such a big thing at the time, but everything kind of ends up back at the status quo, and that's normal, and people start but getting different types of jobs. Like some of the
There's a
jobs
new
that we
one.
know never even had jobs 20 years ago, like social media managers. So there's just this whole wave of new positions, new careers to kind of suit whatever tech or anything that's happening at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does take time to kind of even out again.
That's so true. I think any kind of people within the millennial generation, which I guess we are, were we the first generation that like tried to explain what our jobs were to like our parents, and they're like, what? I don't understand what that is. That's not a job.
Or how many of us online.
are in jobs that like when we were younger, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like, oh, well, I really want to be like, you know, a senior manager of like business analysis. Like, what?
Always my dream.
Yeah, exactly. So new jobs will be created. The new normal will emerge from it.
Yeah, and it's just changed, and nobody likes.
But the change is disruptive, and it can be harmful, right? Let's just not to like underestimate that. It can be
definitely
harmful.
Yeah.
But it's actually, I mean, my prediction around this, which I think I'm not unique in at all, is that whereas, you know, to date, a lot of the higher paid roles that exist, because it's, you know, supply and demand, like the higher valued roles, were very much like knowledge based roles, you know, so things that required advanced university degrees potentially, but things like, you know, like lawyers and accountants and, you know, these big kind of, you know, knowledge based roles are like data analysts, coders,
in their heads,
developers, all of that kind of thing. Very much like if you sit and do your work at a computer, right? Those jobs. But AI is and will take over a lot of those. Not completely by any means, but like if it's step 0 to 100, they might take 80 of those steps over, and you only have to do 80 to 100, right? So it's going to take a lot of those over in ways that will be problematic in a different way that we're not going to talk about today, but it will take a lot of those over. And what actually will become a lot more valued, I think, in society are skills-based trades.
Oh my God, you've even seen that recently.
Yeah, it's so hard to get, first of all, tradespeople and good tradespeople and reliable tradespeople, all of that. But when we were younger, it was like, oh, you need to go to school to do like computer science, right?
Yeah,
that was
get a degree
when we were there. Do computer science, because you'll always have a job with computer science, and you'll walk out of your job with like €50,000 like salary. You're like, okay. I think now the advice of people would be go do an apprenticeship.
Do a trade,
Go do an apprenticeship. Like
you'll never be out of work, pretty much.
And when you look at like how so much of the world now is like governments are starting to really like, because the housing crises are so big across the whole world, right? And they're looking at investing heavily into building and infrastructure. And if you look at, you know, some of the platforms that have recently been released for the Canadian federal election, so much of the talk is about we need to start building again. We need big infrastructure projects. We need high-speed railway. We need like so many new houses, right? Like that really is, and even manufacturing things like, you know, they're looking for massive increases in defense spending, and they want to bring a lot more manufacturing into countries where maybe previously it hadn't been. And even things like the manufacturing that's involved to build a data center, there's a lot less computer science needed than there used to be, because it's fairly well thought out and you can model it very easily. But you need people to go and fucking build all of the components of those data centers, and that's not even including, you consider the resources that have to go into it in terms of like, you know, water and electricity and all of these kind of things that all need to be built as well. And so that's skills traits, and I think that's where the money, like when we talk about the shift in like jobs, that's, if I was to give any young person advice, it's like, if you have any inclination where you think you would like to get into the trades, one of the trades or some sort of skills trades, like in specialist stuff, like just do it. Like, don't get bought in by the I have to go to university people. I would actually spin it that you would be more likely to be successful in the future if you could actually have a trade that you can rely on.
Yeah. And more consistently employed, probably throughout your life.
Employed,
you know, because you can work for yourself. You can work, like, it's so flexible, those jobs.
So flexible.
And very unlikely that AI is going to take over. You know, my sink's broken. What am I going to use AI to fix it? You know, I
mean, it'll give you a step-by-step instruction.
Yeah. But if it's something electrical, like, I'm not going to touch that.
No, exactly. I'm not building my own house.
No, I will get an electrician.
Fair play to all the people who are able to look at YouTube videos and do that, but the vast majority of people are not attempting to do a lot of the stuff themselves.
Not plumbing anyway. Like, if I need to fix my like, nothing like that. That's going to be a really big problem if I do it wrong.
Complex. Yeah. There's a reason apprenticeships exist. Like, you need those years to learn how to be an expert.
There's a reason they're valuable jobs now.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of sad I didn't become like an electrician or a plumber or something.
You still could.
That's true, actually.
Yeah.
It could.
And it's also a great thing. So for immigration, so if you're looking to have more flexibility in the future in terms of like global immigration, a lot of countries are kind of starting to like cap their immigration until like infrastructure. Well, some countries are doing it until infrastructure can catch up. Some companies are doing it because racism. But a lot of countries are doing it because they need the infrastructure to catch up to immigration, right?
Yeah.
Canada's a great example. Canada needs immigration and a certain clip of it in order to actually continue to be a viable society, because it's a Western country, birth rates are low, it's a big country, et cetera, et cetera. However, it hasn't kept up with the infrastructure build to date that to actually account for it. So now we're so far behind in infrastructure that the rate of immigration is starting to test the system too much, and so they want to cap immigration to build the infrastructure back and then start building up immigration again, which is a great plan. If they can do that and they do it, great plan. But if you are looking for mobility in your future, trades are one of the things that, when immigration is concerned, is not really being like they're one of the things people are looking for. And so
it's more favorably
looked
at now than it was.
Exactly. It's not so much your college graduates anymore. It's if you have a skills trade, there's like specific immigration channels for that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's nearly easier now than it is, say, with a business degree to get, a visa for here if you're a tradesman or a tradeswoman. Because that's a requirement right now. That's what they need.
That's what countries need.
Exactly.
So that's my career advice. Don't do what we're doing.
We've made a terrible mistake.
We are all going to go be electricians.
Oh my God.
So my brother did a tremendous thing. Like, he did consider like the university route. It wasn't for him, which honestly I think is a great
fair
choice to be able to make. Like, to be able to make that choice is like so hard to do. So amazing that he was able to make that decision. And he's just become a fully qualified electrician at the beginning of the year. He finished his final exams or whatever. And honestly, I keep telling him, and I'm like, you understand that you've cracked the code of the future.
You're the smartest sibling.
You may think that you didn't do the traditional route and your friends are doing it, whatever I said, but understand that you cracked the secret. Like, you're going to be looking back at this in 20 years and being like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, definitely. God. Oh, well, we'll just have to pick up some trade skills or something. Going, I don't know. No. Leave that to the professionals. Hopefully our jobs don't get taken over by AI. They won't.
They might.
They won't. I'm being very pessimistic. What I mean is, again, with the human element to it as well, right? If you're planning or starting operations from scratch in a new startup or a small business, or you're going in to kind of, see the lay of the land and things like that, you do need, human thought. You can use ChatGPT to help you formulate a plan or analyze data or something like that, but you need to be able to use your experience and your knowledge to use that data to make things better.
I agree. And I think one of the big things for, I guess, career advice for people in our position, the big thing is adaptability.
Exactly.
So there's this day you can't really afford to sit back and just see what happens with AI. You have to actively seek out the tools within your specific area and what's being used, and learn how to use them and see how they can enhance your work. So I think marketing is such a great example of this. Like, this way better than me, Leslie, but like the difference between content creation 5 years ago versus today. Yeah. Because for most of the marketing stuff, like, the content you're creating isn't like, you're not trying to win a Pulitzer, right? Like, you're not creating original content for the purposes of writing the next new novel or creating the next symphony. Like, writing, it doesn't like venture into art. Obviously it is an artistic thing, but it's very functional, right? Like, you're doing
there's patterns to it, and the things you say in a marketing post, and words and the style of things you use. And that's why I was talking about, is the concept of using AI for content creation and things like that cheating? Because it does feel like that, right? When you write an article with AI, but it would be cheating if it wrote something that was perfect, came across as you had written it, and no one had any kind of questions like, that doesn't seem right. Because you and I both know when you do something with AI and you read it, it's not 100% accurate, very rarely anywhere near 100% accurate, but it gives you a good starting point to jump off of. And because everybody is using it now, you're only going to fall behind if you're not doing that to kind of enhance your work. And be able to kind of get that first draft to give you ideas, generate new ideas for you to work with. So that's why I don't think it's cheating, but it does feel like it is, because you're trained to, or just your oh my God, I can't think of the word it is, but you're trained to think that things should take longer. The longer it takes
Mm,
and the more
more
sweat equity you
worthy
put
it
into
is.
it. Exactly. And for something like writing, you know, you picture like a writer in the middle of the night, like scribbling things like that. And you're like, well, that's not what I'm actually doing here. I'm just like typing a few things into ChatGPT and it's coming out with like a great
Yeah.
draft of something.
Yeah.
But that's what it is now. And it's the same as something like a AutoCAD or things like that, where people would have had to draw manual plans before, but then like
Mm.
AutoCAD came along, or even like projectors that give artists like lines, you know, so they can do that. Like that's cheating, but it's like if they still have to do the art.
You have to do it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like, I mean, at one point, Googling would have been considered
Yeah.
cheating at your job.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Right.
like, if
So,
you don't already know this in your head, you have to look it up. It's not real. It's like, no,
yeah.
people got over that, right? But
Yeah.
it's, and then you got good at Googling correctly, right? That makes sense for your
Yes.
job, not just like accepting the first thing that came up, you know, on
Mhm.
Yahoo Answers.
Mhm.
Throwback.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, because the thing is like, imagine, I guess you're creating like a marketing campaign,
Mhm.
right? And I think you consider like the purpose and the stake. So to your point, the image of like the writer in the middle of the night, like scribbling. To me, when I see that, I see someone who's writing like, you
A
know,
novel.
a novel, right? Like a book,
Yeah.
or like poetry, right? You know, like more art, I guess, or original art, or the arts more specifically.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think
Or journalists. You know,
yeah,
like
a
that.
journalist,
Yeah.
100%. Yes,
Yeah.
journalists. Yeah, when you have to kind of assess critically and do like a ton of research. But you know, if I'm creating a bunch of articles to sell a product, right, my purpose is to get it in front of eyeballs, right, to hit as much of the SEO as possible, right, and all of these things, because you're really trying to, the purpose is to push a product. Then, you know, creating a marketing campaign with ChatGPT that says, hey, here's my product, here's what I'm doing, I need to create a marketing campaign across these things, like what are like the recommended best practices, can you create a skeleton and brainstorm some ideas?
Yeah, exactly. It just it starts you off quicker.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you could spend days like manually writing a marketing plan. But why? Like they generally have the same components of them, right? And then if you give it some data, it can definitely help you get there quicker rather than just like creating it for you and that's it. There is a human element to it, and you have to have a level of expertise to know what it's telling you and where it's going wrong, right? So
I think that's the big thing. The difference between me and you, Leslie, is that you can go in and be like, hey, can you create a marketing campaign, blah, 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 everything I just said. And you'll be like, oh, that's good, or that's not good, or that's great, or that needs tweaking. I do it as not a marketer and be like, well, I guess this is fine. Like, I don't know how to assess it critically.
Lots of buzzwords and you're like, wow.
Yeah. Like if someone went and said, hey, can you like generate a treatment plan, right? Yeah. I would be like, well, I'm not a doctor, so I have no way of knowing whether this is real, not real, good, harmful, or if it'll kill me, right? You would still need a doctor.
Find out if you follow it.
Exactly. Like you could have a doctor go into something and be like, here's my patient, here's the stuff, generate a treatment plan. And then the doctor reads the treatment plan and says, yes, that's right. No, that's wrong. No, that wouldn't be applicable here. Blah, 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 blah. Right.
Yeah. Oh, I might have thought of that piece because it might come up with something you didn't know.
Right.
But you have to have the
important. Yeah. You have to be able to assess whether it's good or bad. And you only do that with the expertise. Right.
Exactly.
And that's where I think it's not cheating.
Exactly.
It's just helping.
It is. It is. It's just making your job a little bit easier or quicker.
The big thing in that is what it is fundamentally doing, and we joke about our intern Fionn, because that is fundamentally how we use it, is that one of the first things AI is eliminating or will eliminate is entry level and intern positions, where you're bringing people into an industry, a company for the first time with no experience, and you're showing them the ropes. So you aren't giving them instructions like, hey, can you go and research everything about this topic for me? But as the expert, you're reviewing their work, right? Now, you know, use AI for it. And so it's going to be very tricky, because we're at an interesting point where a lot of experts exist because we have come up through the ranks and gotten the experience.
Yes.
And so we now have the knowledge to be able to assess whether it's good or bad. But if AI eliminates those entry level intern positions, entry level, and then eventually mid-level positions, how do you get from knowing nothing to being experienced enough to be able to assess that?
That's a really good point. Yeah.
That's going to be a problem. At some point in the future, I don't know when, but
there'll be no starting point to learn to get to be an expert. It'll just be sorry, you have to be expert straight away.
Yeah, that would start to become problematic.
Well, that is a big problem for another day.
Next time,
yes,
let's imagine a world where that happens and see if we can figure it
out. And we will.
Maybe.
Oh God.
Anyway, I think my green flag for the week is discovering that I'm apparently a member of a giant family of men that all look like each other.
I didn't know where that was going. It's great. I always knew I was a middle-aged man with a beard. Somewhere.
Yeah, there's this whole circle that I didn't know I was a part of, and apparently I am now.
Oh my god.
That's my red flag then. Hilarious thumbnail for us. It's just like both of our pictures side by side. It's like, here's what AI thinks we look like.
Yeah, we both look like. And to be fair, like if it came up with a version of us that looked like us, it would probably be quite similar anyway, like the blonde hair, like white Irish girls, you know.
Maybe, yeah.
With my glasses, but the fact that we came up with similar middle-aged men, like,
yeah, you should
uneasy.
Maybe we could put at the end of the video is just both of those pictures.
Yeah, what our AI thought we looked like.
Yeah,
I'm sure he would have thought I was a girl. I don't know why, but maybe that's my own bias.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I don't know why. Yeah, because like I work in marketing, you know, things like that. Like that is inherently not a female area, but more women than men. So maybe communications, especially as well, there's a lot more females in communications. So yeah, I'm shocked that it didn't bias me that way.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because all I talk about is comms and marketing in there. Oh my god, this guy won't shut up about Marcom. Anyway, I have no red flags or green flags.
Great.
Because nothing good and nothing bad. No.
Well, you know, nobody. I mean, boring is underestimated.
I know. Yeah. It is. I will come up with some more though for next week. Sure.
But you know, I mean, everybody thinks they want to live in unprecedented times, but I think one of the best things you could wish anybody at the moment is may you exist in precedented
times. Yeah.
Oh, may you have a boring week where nothing happens. Actually, that would be nice.
That is actually the goal.
Yeah.
Nothing terrible happens, but we'll see. Anyway, okay. Perfect. Great chat.
Great chat.
Next week. Good job. All right.
Good job. Well done.
Okay. Goodbye.
Bye.